Worthless alien girl thrown off a slave transport ship. As surplus. Only a man found her and took her in. Kepler 91g. The moon of silence. Here, rain was melody. Silence. A form of prayer. Auden Lair woke not to peace, but to something fractured. A wrongness in the echo. Subtle, but undeniable. The morning vines were singing too early. He stood at the edge of his sound fields, boots planted in soaked moss, breath steaming in the chill. The air was thick with damp mist pressing close against skin and mind alike. In the distance, thunder coiled low over the ridgeline, its resonance tugging at the vines, coaxing song from their roots. But the notes were off, crooked, like something grieving ahead of time. Morning vines didn't bloom in the morning. They didn't resonate unless death was near, or sorrow. Deep sorrow. He narrowed his eyes and stepped down from the high trail, boots squelching into the wet slope that led to his lower fields. The crops here weren't like those of other worlds. They shimmered with emotion, fed not just by water or sun, but by feeling. Grief harps, joy fruit, whisper bark. And today, the air around them was wrong, sick almost. The wind had no voice, yet the field murmured like it knew a secret. Something was here. He walked deeper between the rows. Mist curled around his knees like breath escaping the earth. The vines to his left quivered, not in wind but in feeling. The sound they made was low and wet, like someone trying to hold back sobs beneath a blanket. Then he saw her, half buried in the muck. A shape, barely distinguishable from the field at first. Just another patch of purple shadow among the gray. But this shadow had breath, movement, life. Auden froze. She was curled in on herself, knees drawn tight to her chest, arms wrapped protectively over her head. Mud soaked her to the bone, sticking to every visible surface. Her skin, violet, not bruised but natural. Deep, dark violet that shimmered faintly where the rain touched it. Her hair, long and crimson, was plastered to her back and tangled across her face. She wore nothing but a torn, threadbare wrap. Slave fabric, stripped down to function, not dignity. But it was her eyes that held him still. They were open, wide, still, copper-hued, threaded with gold, not pleading, not vacant, just watching. Auden crouched slowly, knees pressing into the saturated ground. He didn't speak, didn't reach for her, just observed. Her lips parted. She didn't beg. She didn't whisper for help or cry out like others might have. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, but steady, like she was stating a fact. "Don't leave me here. I'm not broken, just cold." It hit harder than a scream. She hadn't collapsed completely. She hadn't given up. Whatever she'd endured before finding herself dumped in this field, whatever ship or system had discarded her as excess weight, none of it had taken her voice. She was still holding herself together. Barely, but enough. Auden didn't answer. Words would only muddy the moment. Instead, he moved carefully, slow enough not to alarm her, but with purpose. He slid the heavy outer layer of his weather cloak from his shoulders and laid it across hers. She tensed as the fabric touched her, a sharp, instinctive flinch, but she didn't recoil. Her eyes followed him the entire time. That flinch wasn't fear, it was memory, her body reacting before her thoughts caught up. Muscle memory learned through punishment. Contact meant command. Touch preceded orders. But this contact didn't demand, it offered. And for one long breath, she closed her eyes and let herself be touched without flinching. He reached beneath her knees with one arm and supported her back with the other. As his hands found her form, the soil around them shifted, almost imperceptibly. The roots below hummed, not alarm, not fear, just attention. The vines responded to her presence again. They remembered her pain. And as Auden lifted her into his arms, the grief vines trembled, not in mourning, but in recognition. He didn't miss it. And for the first time in 10 years, the silence of his fields didn't feel holy. It felt incomplete. Her body jolted, like a spark of memory had surged through her. But when she met his eyes again, she gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He lifted her. She weighed almost nothing. Skin stretched thin over bone, soaked fabric adding more weight than her frame. But it wasn't her body that burdened him, it was the silence. The sense that this was not the first time she'd been carried like this, and that the last time had broken her. The fog pressed against his back as he climbed the slope toward his home. Rain hissed in the grass and hummed softly in the vines behind them. She said nothing, but she didn't struggle. His homestead stood above the cloud line, small, reinforced, and built for silence. Stone, weather-treated metal, and thick acoustic shielding to keep the emotional crops from overwhelming the walls. It was a sanctuary, not just from sound, but from memory. He nudged the door open with his knee, stepping into the dry interior. She shivered in his arms, but still didn't speak. He laid her gently on the padded bench near the heat coil, stripping off the soaked blanket and replacing it with a dry one from the storage alcove. Her fingers twitched when the warmth touched her, but she didn't move. Only when he knelt beside her again did she finally turn her head. Her voice was lower now, softer, but there was awe in it. The sound here speaks different. Even the silence doesn't hate me. He blinked. That sentence was too specific to be poetic. It was something she'd believed for a long time. He didn't respond, just brought her dry socks, a clean cup of heated water. She hesitated before taking it as though expecting it to be yanked away, but after a moment her fingers closed around the metal. She drank in small, shaking sips. Her hands trembled badly. She spilled once. Didn't apologize. He noticed her eyes glistened, but whether from pain or warmth, he couldn't tell. Her throat worked like she was swallowing something bitter. Still, she never said thank you, and he never asked her to. When she finished the water, he took the cup without comment and moved to adjust the lighting, lowering it to a soft golden hue that filled the room with a kind of quiet peace. She leaned against the wall now, cocooned in the blanket like a brittle animal in recovery, but her eyes were still on him, watching, assessing. He knew that look. It wasn't trust, it was survival. She was scanning him for tells, waiting to see when the cost would appear. He didn't give her one. Instead, he rolled out a spare cot by the Sound Harvest window and layered it with thick fabric, placing a second blanket folded neatly at the foot. He didn't speak, he didn't ask questions, he just made space. Behind them, the storm softened. The morning vines outside began to quiet, no longer wailing, but sighing gently. She shifted on the bench. "I don't owe you anything," she said at last, barely more than a whisper. He didn't even look up from what he was doing. "No," he said simply. "You don't." That seemed to land somewhere unexpected. She blinked once, slowly, like she hadn't considered that might be an option. After a few more minutes, she tried to stand. Her legs nearly gave out beneath her, and he was beside her in 2 steps, close enough to catch but not touching. She found her footing again and made her slow way to the cot. She didn't say goodnight. He didn't expect her to. When she lay down, it was stiffly, as though her body had forgotten how to rest. Her hands stayed balled into fists, even under the blanket. Her back didn't touch the mattress. Her eyes remained open, but over time her breathing changed, slower, deeper. Eventually her fists unclenched. Her shoulders dropped an inch. Her eyelids fluttered and stilled. Auden remained at the table, sipping cooled tea and listening to the quiet. It had been years since anyone else had slept in this space, and yet the room didn't feel intruded upon. It felt altered, subtly, like something long dormant had stirred, and the house itself was listening. Outside, the storm rolled farther down the valley, and the vines, soaked in grief only hours ago, began to hum something else. Something tender, something new. When Sirai opened her eyes, the light felt softer than it should. Not like cell lights, not like freight bay fluorescence or the sterile white of slave stations. This light was gold-hued and filtered through fog. It spilled in through the Sound Harvest window in long, quiet bands and touched nothing sharply. There were no shadows that moved, no commands barked from behind doors, no footsteps echoing toward her, just warmth. Her fingers were curled in the edge of a thick blanket. For a moment, her body didn't know how to respond. Her muscles stayed locked, waiting for some unseen demand. Her legs ached, though she hadn't moved. Her stomach was hollow, but nothing struck her. No voice ordered her up. No belt came down for being too slow. She shifted slightly and froze. Across the room, a man was placing something on a table. Steam curled from a cup in his hand. The scent drifted to her before she could look away. Citrus and wood smoke. Something deep and earthy. He glanced toward her, not surprised to see her awake. His expression didn't shift. She sat up slowly, wincing at the way her bones protested. Every bruise bloomed again as she moved, her joints reluctant, her breath tight. Still, she pushed the blanket off and lowered her feet to the floor. "Is this real?" Her voice cracked as she spoke. Auden didn't answer right away. He placed a second cup on a low table near her cot. "You're awake, that's real enough." Sarai wrapped the blanket around her shoulders again, but not like before. This time, It wasn't a shield. It was warmth she accepted. You don't keep guards, she murmured. He shook his head. Don't need any. No surveillance. No chains, no cuffs. I build silence here, not prisons. She looked away, eyes fixed on the mist outside. Then why did you bring me in? Auden didn't flinch at the question. He leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. Because you were still alive. It wasn't a hero's answer. It wasn't dressed in pity or virtue. It was simple, practical, honest. And somehow, it made her trust him a little more. She reached for the cup. Her hands trembled, but she managed to lift it. The warmth seeped into her palms, steadied her breathing. The first sip hit like a memory. The taste was unlike anything she'd had in captivity. Floral, a little bitter, grounding. She swallowed too quickly, coughed once, then took another. I used to know teas like this, she said, back when I mattered. Auden said nothing, but he didn't look away. I was born to a diplomat's caste, she continued. We trained to hear nuance, speak without aggression, mediate. I knew 6 dialects before I was 15, 12 by 19. My voice was currency. She looked down into her cup. Then the war came. My people fell, and my voice became a liability. Auden watched her, still silent, letting the words come as they chose. They called me Asset 117K. Too proud to sell well, too educated to trust. They kept the hair because it marked my caste, left everything else behind. She didn't cry. Her tone wasn't broken. It was flat, controlled. That was worse. I was passed between ships like spoiled cargo, eventually thrown out. No paperwork, no resale value, just dropped. She laughed under her breath, sharp, bitter. I'm only here because someone miscalculated my weight against fuel reserves. The room held the weight of her words like breath held too long. Even the hum of the kettle seemed to go quiet. Then softly Auden said, The vines bloomed before sunrise yesterday. She blinked. What? He pushed away from the counter and moved to the window. Outside, the morning vines shimmered in the mist, their stems quiet now, but still alert. They only bloom like that when grief's nearby. Real grief, not pain, not fear, resonant sorrow. He looked at her. They woke before I did. Sci-Fi held his gaze for a moment, then lowered her eyes. She didn't answer. Eventually, she placed the cup on the table. Her hand hesitated near the ceramic as though afraid to let go. But she did. Then, with surprising steadiness, she stood. I want to see them. Auden raised a brow. The vines, she clarified, the ones that knew I was here. He didn't argue, just nodded, picked up his field jacket, and offered it to her. She slid her arms into the sleeves, the fabric hanging loose on her smaller frame. But she didn't complain, didn't ask for help. Outside, the chill met them quickly. The fog was lighter than yesterday, the rain reduced to scattered droplets that clung to leaves and caught the light like dew. Sci-Fi squinted at the sky, uncertain. This place, she said quietly. It doesn't sound empty. It sounds held. He led her down the sloping path toward the lower field. The plants shifted around them, tall stalks humming faintly, leaves vibrating at pitches too soft to track unless you listened with your bones. Here, sound lived in root and resonance. You grow music, she said. I grow emotion, he corrected. Music is just a byproduct. They reached the morning vines. She stepped toward one and paused, glancing back. Can I? He nodded. They'll let you know. She extended a hand. Her fingers hovered above a pale strand. The vine responded, subtly at first, then with a low, harmonic shiver that vibrated through the air. Sci-Fi closed her eyes. It's sad. They echo you, Auden said. That's how they know what to give back. She opened her eyes slowly, drawing in a breath. They never echoed me before. That's because they weren't listening. Most people don't. She turned to face him fully then. Her posture wasn't defensive, but not open either. Something in between. Why are you here? She asked. Really? You don't strike me as a man running from war. You're running from something else. Auden hesitated. Then almost reluctantly he said, I was a sound engineer. Back on Earth. Created weapons-grade sonic landscapes, used for interrogations, suppression, psychological control. I quit when they asked me to design frequencies that could drive people insane without leaving a mark. Sci-Fi studied him. And you said no? I said silence should never be weaponized. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then, you're wrong. He frowned. She touched another vine. This one glowed faintly at the base, a reaction she hadn't seen before. Silence is already a weapon. They used it on me every day. Locked me in without sound, without voices, without meaning. After a while, silence wasn't peace anymore. It was erasure. Her voice cracked on the last word. Just slightly. But it was enough. Auden didn't move, didn't try to fix it. He simply said, "Then maybe it's time you reclaimed it." She looked up, startled. Silence. He gestured around them. "Here, it means something else. It's not absence. It's a space to plant sound that matters." She didn't reply, but her jaw flexed. Her throat worked as she swallowed something unspoken. They walked back in silence. But this one was different. Not sharp, not empty, shared. Inside the cabin, the light had shifted again. Afternoon filtered in, soft and hazy. She sat by the window once more, the coat still around her, the blanket now folded beside her instead of wrapped tight. Auden prepared another cup of tea and brought it over without a word. She took it. No shaking this time. "My name," she said suddenly, "is Sirai." He looked at her, surprised. "Auden," he answered. "I know," she said, faintly smiling. "The vines told me." It wasn't a joke, but there was humor in it. A thread of levity not born from pain. He didn't smile back. Not fully. But something in him eased. And outside, as the rain returned in a whisper, the vines began to sing again. Not in sorrow. In something gentler. Something like hope. The mist lay heavy that morning, like the land itself didn't want to wake. Auden stood alone in the lower field, gloved hands hovering just above the trembling cords of a grief vine. The vibrations were different today, less mournful, more tentative. The plants weren't echoing loss, they were waiting. Behind him, footsteps moved softly over wet soil. No stumble, no hesitation. He turned. Sirai approached with deliberate steps, her body wrapped in the oversized field jacket. She'd dressed herself in the clothes he'd left folded near the cot, practical layers tucked neatly, sleeves rolled to suit her arms, pants cinched at the waist. The fit was awkward in places, but the effect was striking. She looked present, not just upright, but grounded, alert. "I didn't wake you," he said. "You didn't need to," she replied, brushing damp hair from her face. "I heard the quiet change." He watched her. She wasn't fragile anymore, not cautious in the same way. Something had shifted, subtle, but real. "I want to help," she said. Auden raised a brow. "With the harvest?" "With listening." He studied her a moment, then gestured toward the southern rows. "Follow me." They moved through the mist-wrapped field where the hum of the vines pulsed low against the earth. The crops weren't grown for sustenance, but for resonance, for the harvesting of emotion encoded in sound. Joy fruit, grief vines, lullabuds, each one alive with frequency, tuned not just to touch, but to presence. Sirai reached out toward a nearby vine. She moved too quickly. The stalk recoiled, releasing a sharp buzz that snapped through the air. She pulled back instinctively. "Too fast," Auden said. She nodded once, no excuse, no embarrassment, just awareness. She extended her hand again, slower this time, and the vine responded with a quiet, breath-like tone. "That's better." She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "So it's like negotiation." "It's like truth," he replied. "You don't force a reaction, you earn it." They continued deeper into the quieter quadrant, where the more delicate crops grew, emotion-sensitive plants that absorbed rather than echoed. She followed him wordlessly, her focus sharp, movements careful. She didn't mimic him, she observed, then adjusted, until her rhythm matched the terrain. At the edge of a lullabud patch, Auden watched as she knelt beside one of the small, nearly translucent blooms. She leaned in and exhaled gently across the petals. They opened slowly, responding not just to warmth, but to resonance. A faint harmonic shimmer lifted from the plant. "That's rare," he murmured. "They don't open for most." She didn't answer, but she looked settled, like something in her posture had unlocked. She moved to the next row without waiting for direction. "You've done this before," Auden said. "No," she replied, "but I've listened before." Sarai reached a grief harp, long vertical strands anchored into the soil. She extended both hands slowly, palms facing the strands. A deep pulse rose through the ground. The harp answered her with a tone Auden had never heard, layered, unsteady, yet beautiful. He crouched beside her. "That's new," he said. They've never made that sound for me. Sire tilted her head. Then maybe they've never met someone who mourned and survived it. A pause passed. Wind brushed through the rose. Neither spoke. Finally, Auden stood. You should eat something. Sire's brow rose. Is that how you compliment people? No, he said. That's how I say you're doing well. They walked back in silence. Inside, the warmth of the cabin greeted them with the scent of slow-simmered broth and fruit steam. Auden plated food without ceremony. Root mash, softened grain rounds, slices of preserved seed fruit. He placed the dishes on the table, stepped back. Sire didn't wait. She sat and began to eat with measured, deliberate bites. Not starving, not desperate, just focused. Halfway through, she paused, holding a slice of fruit between her fingers. They used to flavor block the food, said taste made us defiant. She took another bite, slower. This tastes like choice. Auden said nothing. He let her have the moment. Later, with cups of tea in hand, they stood again by the window. The mist outside shifted in slow spirals. Why do you live here? She asked. This moon, this silence. Auden leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I used to write sound for systems, military applications, emotional disruption fields. They wanted my resonance algorithms for crowd control, psyops. I said no. And they exiled you for that? He met her eyes. I exiled myself. I didn't want to see what they'd turn my work into. Sire considered that. You think this place redeems you? I think it asks for something harder than obedience. She nodded slowly. Like listening instead of commanding. A beat. You said yesterday that silence isn't absence, that it's space. I thought about that last night. And? I realized no one ever gave me space before. Just orders or nothing at all. Auden looked at her, really looked. There were no chains on her now, no posture of defeat. Her spine was straight, her gaze steady. The jacket still draped her like armor, but not like something borrowed, more like something earned. They stepped outside again before dusk. The sky was silver blue, washed in the soft glow that came just before the rains returned. Sire moved ahead now, checking the vines, adjusting tension on one of the grief harps with the careful touch of someone who knew not to assume control, but offer stability. She reached a vine that had never reacted before. It shimmered faintly, then bloomed, sudden and slow, petals unfolding like a breath being let out. Auden paused beside her, staring. I've been harvesting this field for 10 years, he said. That plant's never bloomed. She glanced at him. Maybe it needed someone who wasn't trying to use it. He didn't respond, but something in him shifted. They walked the edge of the field as the light faded. The crops glowed faintly in the low light, some pulsing softly with residual tone. The air was thick with sound, but not noise. A symphony of breath, sorrow, renewal. When they reached the cabin again, Sire didn't head in first. She waited. When he stepped beside her, she walked forward, not behind, not alone, not uncertain. Together. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Auden felt the tension in his chest loosen, not disappear, but yield. As he closed the door behind them, the vines outside began to vibrate with something new. Not a tone he recognized, but one that felt like the beginning of something growing. The fire had long since burned down to low embers. Outside, the mist was thick, clinging to the windows in slow sliding threads. Sire sat on the floor with her knees drawn to her chest, wrapped loosely in a wool blanket. Her bare feet rested against the heated tiles, but she didn't seem to notice the warmth. She hadn't said a word in over an hour, and Auden, true to habit, hadn't filled the silence. Instead, he sat across from her near the hearth, knees up, arms resting on them, not watching her, just staying. Holding the space around her like a fence that didn't press, only shielded. The only sound was the soft creak of the walls adjusting to the night. Finally, Sire spoke. There was a boy. Her voice was quiet but not hesitant. Not mine. He was born on a transport vessel. Mother died on entry. They called him number 8. Not a name, just a number. Auden didn't move. I wasn't supposed to care. We weren't supposed to get attached. They punished that kind of thing. But he was small and he cried all the time. So I used to hum old songs from my language. Things meant to calm warriors before they entered negotiation halls. She looked into the hearth. It worked. He stopped crying when I sang. That's why they stopped letting me near him. Auden felt his jaw tighten. I never saw him again. They sold me to a refiner outpost on a moon I don't remember. He was gone before I left. She blinked once, not to cry, just to stay in control. That's the part they don't tell you. How loss doesn't always scream. It just disappears. It drains from the world without ceremony. Auden lowered his gaze. He knew that kind of silence. They made you forget what you were, he said. Sirai shook her head. Number. They made me feel like remembering was rebellion. Auden's throat went dry. He wanted to say something, comforting, meaningful, but all he could feel was the pressure of a sound he hadn't made in years, building in the back of his chest. He stood slowly, crossed the room, and crouched beside her. Not to touch her. Not yet. Just to be closer. She didn't look at him, but she didn't shrink away either. You still remember, he said quietly. That's the rebellion. Her lips trembled once, but she pulled them back into composure. You said the vines responded to me because of grief. They respond to truth, Auden corrected. She finally turned toward him, her face in shadow, but her eyes, amber and steady, held a depth he hadn't let himself acknowledge until now. I've told you things I haven't told anyone, she said, and you don't even ask why. I don't need to, he replied. You're here, that's reason enough. Sirai let out a slow breath. Then she asked, what about you? Auden hesitated. She pressed gently. Why did you really come here? Why this moon? He sat down beside her. I used to work in acoustic psychology. Started out healing. Restorative sound for trauma therapy. I believed in it. Believed resonance could mend things you couldn't see. She listened. Then Earth's defense sector took interest. Said they needed new forms of non-lethal suppression. Asked me to design frequencies that could fracture cognition without touching flesh. Sirai's eyes darkened. I refused, at first. But contracts change, clauses shift. Before I realized it, I was designing sound that erased memory, broke continuity of self. He looked away. One test went wrong. Or maybe it went exactly right, which was worse. They played the prototype over a prisoner. She didn't scream, didn't cry, she just stopped. A long silence fell between them. I walked away the next day, Auden continued. Wiped every algorithm. They labeled me unstable. Said I violated contract. So I left Earth and came here. Grew crops that listened instead of obeyed. Sirai shifted closer. You stopped being part of the machine, she said. No, he answered. I became something the machine couldn't use. She tilted her head. You still think of yourself that way. He didn't answer. She reached up, slowly, as if asking permission without words, and brushed her fingers against his shoulder. He didn't flinch. He closed his eyes. I think we both became echoes, she said, but somehow you grew a place where echoes could live. He turned his face toward her. Their eyes met again. There was no heat in it, no desperate charge, just two people, seeing the raw, unclean truths in one another and choosing to stay anyway. She leaned into him, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't shift to pull her closer or retreat. He simply let it happen. Outside, the vines had begun to hum again. Low circular tones spiraling across the soil like recognition. I thought if anyone ever touched me again, I'd shatter, she whispered. But now, I think I just needed to be held where no one expected anything in return. You're not being held, Auden said. You're being met. She breathed in, slow, full. Then let this moment be enough. They stayed like that for a long time, until the fire burned low and the moon's light broke through the thinning mist, until their bodies, warm and tired, leaned into stillness instead of bracing against it. And when the cot beside the fire felt too far, when the separate beds felt like a memory they no longer needed, she rose first, turned, looked at him, and without shame or hesitation said, "Will you lie beside me?" He stood. He didn't ask why. He didn't touch her until she reached for his hand. And when they lay down, no distance between them, he didn't expect anything. Not answers, not promises, not sleep, only presence. And for both of them, that was finally more than enough. The warmth between them was real. Not the kind you gather from fire or clothing, but from presence. Two bodies choosing to remain near each other when every scar told them not to. Sirai lay beside him in the dark, her back not quite touching Auden's chest, but close enough to feel the weight of his breath. She hadn't spoken since curling into the space they now shared. She didn't need to. Auden hadn't shifted. Not out of tension or fear, but because stillness felt like the only honest thing to offer. He could feel the tremor in her restraint, how she held herself carefully, not rigid but measured, as if testing whether this intimacy would collapse under its own weight. It didn't. The sound outside was soft, rain like memory, fog pressing gently against the windows. The crops weren't singing, they were resting, as if they too knew this was not a moment to interrupt. He closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he didn't need silence to think. When morning came, he didn't wake to find her gone. She was still there. Her body had shifted sometime during the night, her hand resting lightly near his chest, their knees brushing under the covers. She was still asleep, face turned toward him, expression unworried. Auden moved carefully, rising without disturbing her. He stepped into the outer room and lit the stove. The soft click and hiss of ignition felt like ceremony. He made breakfast, slowly, methodically, mind turning over the weight of what hadn't been said between them, and what didn't need to be. By the time he brought her tea, she was sitting up, hair tousled, blankets gathered loosely around her legs. "Good morning," she said, voice husky with sleep. It was the first time she'd said those words here. He handed her the cup. She took it with a nod, their fingers brushing, this time without flinching. They ate together quietly, the kind of silence that came not from avoidance, but peace. A new kind of rhythm was forming between them. Not dependency, not routine, but presence. Two lives no longer orbiting, but aligning. After they ate, she asked to join him in the field again. "No training today," he warned. "Storm's coming in this evening. It'll push the vines into false resonance, unreliable for harvest. Then we listen instead." They walked the lower rows as clouds began to gather, high and heavy. The wind had changed direction, pulling at the edge of Sirai's jacket as they moved among the stalks. "I've never stayed this long in one place," she said, her fingers grazing the surface of a sleeping harp. "I used to think stillness was dangerous." "Sometimes it is," Auden said. "Stillness doesn't always mean safety, but it's the only way roots grow." She stopped walking. "What about you?" she asked. "What have you grown here besides sound?" He looked out at the rows of humming vines, then back at her. Regret, and maybe something like peace. She smiled softly. "You think this place healed you?" "No," he said. "It gave me somewhere to break quietly. Everything else came later." Sirai moved to a joy fruit stalk and laid her palm gently on the base. The fruit shimmered under her touch, vibrating at a pitch just beyond the human ear. "They never let us grow," she said. "They fed us rules, but they trimmed us down whenever we reached. Why? Because rooted things don't obey as easily." He watched her for a long time, the way her shoulders no longer curled inward, how she no longer moved like a shadow, how she met the plants, the space, and him without shrinking. "You're not a prisoner anymore," he said. "I'm not a ghost either," she answered. "Not here." Rain began again in the early afternoon, sharp, rhythmic, cold. They hurried back toward the cabin, laughing breathlessly as the wind caught the edges of their coats. Inside, they stripped off soaked layers, leaving boots by the door and hanging jackets near the heater. Auden reached for a dry towel and offered it without a word. Sirai took it, draping it around her shoulders as she looked up at him. "Why didn't you touch me that night?" she asked. He froze, towel still in his hands. "I was with you," she continued. "You could have. I wouldn't have stopped you." His voice came low, careful. "Because I wanted it to be about your choice, not my loneliness." She nodded slowly, eyes never leaving his. "And now? I don't feel lonely when you're near. I just feel whole." He hesitated. "Human," he said. "Which is harder." Something broke open between them in that silence. She stepped forward, taking his hands in hers. Wet from the towel, warm from the heat. She pressed them to her cheeks. "I've been touched before," she whispered. "Handled, sold, grabbed. I know what that feels like." He said nothing. "But this," she said, holding his hands tighter. "I want to remember this." Auden moved slowly, lifting one hand to trace the line of her jaw. She didn't flinch. Her breath caught slightly, but she didn't look away. "I don't know how to do this right," he said. "There is no right," she murmured. "There's only now." Their kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't hesitant either. It was steady, deliberate, like the quiet unfolding of something inevitable. Her hands slid to his shoulders, then his neck, and he pulled her closer, as though gravity had decided it, not desire. They didn't speak again for a long time. When they reached the bed, there was no urgency, only reverence. He touched her like a song he hadn't dared to write. She responded like someone finally heard. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't careful. It was sacred. Later, as they lay tangled beneath the blanket, her head resting against his chest, he ran a hand through her hair. She whispered, "I didn't think I had anything left to give." "You didn't give," he said. "You stayed." And outside, in the rain-darkened field, a single vine bloomed in full, not for mourning, not for joy, for truth. The storm passed overnight, leaving behind a strange hush, too quiet for Kepler 91G. No birdsong, no wind in the chimes. Even the sound crops hadn't yet stirred. Auden was the first to rise. He moved through the kitchen with practiced silence, boiling water for tea, checking field monitors out of habit. No warnings, no readings, but a pressure in the air made his jaw tighten. Sarai sat at the windowsill, knees drawn to her chest, blanket over her shoulders. Her hair fell in loose waves, damp from sleep. She hadn't spoken since waking. She didn't need to. Something was wrong. He approached slowly, mug in hand. She took it wordlessly and sipped. Then, "I felt something in the field this morning," she said. "Not the vines. Something else." Auden nodded once. "I checked the atmospheric filters. There's a foreign pulse. Rhythmic, artificial, low orbit." She lowered her mug. "A ship? Scout class. Probably corporate. Just a survey pattern for now." But they both knew what that meant. The corporations had long since turned sound into a commodity. Bottled grief, contracted rage, sonic therapy for the rich, suppression tools for the military. A field as stable and emotionally potent as his had become lately would never go unnoticed. Not when sound was currency, not when something unregistered was resonating far too strong. Sarai went still. "I need to hide," she said. "No." She looked at him. He crouched beside her. "Not this time. You don't disappear." Her eyes darkened. "You think I want to? That I enjoy becoming invisible the moment someone claims I don't belong?" Auden didn't answer. He couldn't. She looked away. "I'm not afraid of death," she said, "but of being renamed again, repackaged. That's what they do. First they erase your voice, then your name." His jaw tightened. "We won't let them. They'll scan everything. Acoustic memory, soil resonance, my biometrics. You can't erase all of it." "I don't need to." He stood, walked to the bench, pulled open the old storage chest beneath his tools. From it, he retrieved a metal case covered in dust. Inside lay a flat coil of black mesh. Lightweight, old tech, illegal in most sectors. "What is that?" she asked. "A resonance mask. It scrambles bodily frequencies. Breath, heartbeat, emotional signature. It was meant for smugglers and sound runners. I built it to hide prisoners. Never used it." He looked up at her. "I'm using it now." Sarai hesitated. She walked toward him, touched the edge of the mask with 2 fingers, then looked at his face. "What happens if it doesn't work?" He paused. "Then we do something louder." By midday, the pulse had grown louder, subsonic now. It buzzed behind the teeth, rattled in the ribs. The crops had flattened their cords in response, silencing themselves like prey, sensing a predator overhead. Then the ship arrived, not with drama, not with noise. Just a shimmer in the sky, a flicker. Then the sound of displacement, air folding in on itself, and a sleek vessel descending near the south field. No insignia, but the shape was unmistakable. Veilcorp. Auden stood at the gate, Sarai behind him, hidden beneath the mask, the thin mesh of it barely visible across her collarbones. 2 scouts emerged. Standard issue enviro suits. No visible weapons. Didn't need them. Their tools were in their data readers, their AI-infused optics, their government partnerships. The taller one stepped forward. "Engineer Lear?" Auden said nothing. "We've detected unscheduled acoustic anomalies in this sector. Unauthorized biosignature. We're here to assess." "You didn't request clearance. You've exceeded your yield quota by 217% in the last cycle," the scout replied. "Your crop is registering emotion levels not possible under solitary labor. That suggests outside influence." Sarai stepped forward before Auden could stop her. She removed the mesh mask in one fluid motion and dropped it to the dirt. The scouts froze. The second one scanned instantly. A soft beep followed. "Confirmed. Asset 117-K biological designation matches archive slave class registry." Sarai spoke. "My name is Sarai. The taller scout didn't flinch. You are unclaimed corporate property, unlawfully harbored on a restricted cultivation moon. This is a Class T breach. No, Auden said. This is her home. Silence, the scout said coldly. This unit will be retrieved. Resistance will result in penalties. Cirai's body tensed. Her breath hitched, not from fear, from memory. Metal cuffs, the sound of boots, the hum of restraints, the way silence had once meant erasure. She turned to Auden. Her voice cracked. They want to make me silent again. Auden stepped forward. You don't have to say anything. I do, she whispered. Because if I don't now, I never will. She looked at the scouts. You call me a unit, an asset, a soundless thing, but you don't understand sound. You only measure it. You don't feel it. Her voice rose, not loud but resonant. I do. The field stirred. Joy fruit vines shimmered. The harp stalks quivered in place. A deep thrum began to pulse beneath their feet. One of the scouts adjusted his sensor. Subject emitting vocal pattern. And then she sang. Not in fear, not in anger, but in clarity. It started as a single sustained note, low, grounded. A pure harmonic frequency, perfectly tuned to the land beneath her. It vibrated through the soil, bounced off the mountains, echoed inside the crops that had grown around her voice for weeks. The sound field awakened. Lullabuds bloomed in unison. Grief vines curled toward her feet like animals seeking their keeper. The harvest harp vibrated violently, throwing off resonance spikes that cracked the scouts' visors. Their equipment shorted. The ship's AI sent out a panic ping and failed to process the emotional overload. Sensors went blind. The scouts fell back. You've destabilized the terrain, one of them choked. This moon is no longer viable. Cirai stepped forward. Then leave it. And they did, without grace, without orders. They ran. By the time the ship lifted off, the air had changed again. Not calm, not quiet, but claimed. They filed the terrain as unstable. No profit in claiming territory that refuses to behave. He nodded. And no way to explain how the resonance field collapsed without admitting their scanners couldn't contain it. Cirai gave the smallest smile. I didn't do it alone. No, Auden said. You just woke it up. They sat in silence for a moment, the fog thickening again around them. The plants had resumed their quiet hum, but even that felt changed. Richer somehow, more grounded. Like the field itself recognized her as part of it now. After a long while, she spoke. I want to stay. Auden turned to her. I didn't think I would, not at first. I thought this place was just a pause, a hiding place before the next danger. But now, she placed her hand on the soil again, pressing her fingers into the moss. Now I know I've never been anywhere I could grow. He didn't respond with words. He reached over and took her hand, not to pull her up, not to carry her, just to hold it there with his. They walked back to the homestead together, slow and unhurried. The path wasn't muddy anymore, only soft. The rain had stopped. Clouds hung low, but the horizon showed a faint line of copper light. Inside, the warmth of the hearth welcomed them. It wasn't just a fire anymore. It was home. That night, Cirai stood in the center of the room while Auden adjusted the tone lines on the sound harvest wall. The vines outside pulsed in gentle rhythm with the adjustments, sending subtle vibrations through the floor like heartbeats. She turned toward him. There's a word in my old language, she said. We used it when a diplomat returned home after war, not for survivors, not for soldiers, just for the ones who came back changed. Auden looked up. What's the word? She took a breath. Serenai. It means still rooted. It was our way of saying, you're part of the soil again. He crossed the room, stepped close enough to see the shimmer in her eyes, and said, then let's root something new. They stepped outside just before dawn. The mist was lifting, pulled upward by the sun cresting the mountains, its light soft and honey-colored. The field, once a place of mourning, now shimmered in shades of green and gold, each vine responding to the atmosphere like it remembered something joyful for the first time. Cirai moved ahead, her bare feet silent on the moss. She knelt near a humming vine and placed her hand on it. Instantly, the field shifted pitch. The harmony deepened. Auden followed her and knelt beside her in the soil. She looked up at him. I thought I was worthless, she said. Excess load, asset 117K. But this place, this moon, and you didn't fix me. You just gave me space. He leaned in, touched her forehead gently with his own. And you filled it with something I didn't think could grow again. They stayed like that, their foreheads pressed together, the hum of the crops rising around them. Later that day, they built a second bed. Not because they needed it, but because this home had space now. Not just for survival, but for living, for being. They shared meals without tension, tended the fields together. And at night, when the world slowed, they spoke in soft tones, sometimes in words, sometimes in sound alone. She sang for him once, soft and slow, a harmony drawn not from pain, but from presence. He played it back through a harvest loop, layering her voice with the pulse of the vines. It became a new composition. He named it The Sound of Staying. Sci-Fi wrote the title in both languages and carved it into the wall near the harvest table. Weeks passed, then months. No ships returned, no reports followed. The world forgot her, but Kepler 91G remembered. So did he, and so did the land. On a clear morning in late season, when the last of the frost vines bloomed, she looked up from the soil and said, "We should plant something that outlives us." Auden smiled. "We already have." In the wind that passed through their quiet field, the crops sang, not with grief, not with warning, not with need, but with love. The kind that doesn't shout, the kind that grows quietly, rooted, unshakable, home. The storm season passed slowly, as it always did on Kepler 91G. Soft and wet, not violent, but persistent. Days blurred into one another under low clouds and sunless skies. And yet, inside the homestead, there was warmth that didn't come from fire. Auden woke to the smell of her. Sci-Fi always woke first, but never left the bed anymore. She stayed close, lying on her side with her hand just above his chest, her breath soft against his skin. This morning was no different, except that her eyes were already open when he stirred, copper-colored and quiet. "You pretend to sleep longer than you do," she murmured. "I like the way you look at me when you think I'm not awake," he answered. She laughed barely. It was the kind of sound that didn't ripple, just sank in gently. "Are you going to open your eyes, or do I have to kiss them open?" Auden didn't move. Might be safer to kiss them open. He felt the shift of her weight before he saw her. A rustle of linen, the brush of her leg over his, and then the whisper of lips, soft, deliberate on his eyelid. Then the other, then his cheek, and then, finally, his mouth. It was not the first kiss, not by far. But this one tasted different, like honeyed tea left too long in the sun, sweet, sleepy, and lingering. He opened his eyes. Her face hovered inches above his, strands of crimson hair falling across his chest. She wasn't smiling in the way people do when they want to be seen smiling. It was the other kind, the real kind, the one that showed in the corners of the eyes before the lips ever caught up. "You always taste like morning," she said. "And you always taste like rain." She kissed him again, slower this time. The kind of kiss that says we're not going anywhere. The kind that pulls time inward and anchors it in breath and skin. She slid beside him, draping herself over his side, head tucked beneath his jaw. Outside, the fields had begun to stir. Low hums rippling over wet leaves, a harmony building in the soil as if the planet itself had exhaled in rhythm with their closeness. The joy fruit pulsed faintly at the base of the hill, even before they touched it. Resonance drawn not from contact, but from contentment. Sci-Fi pressed a kiss to his collarbone, then another, then higher, each one like punctuation in a sentence written only in skin. He smiled without meaning to. "Is this your way of waking me up? Or are you composing something?" She traced her finger along the edge of his jaw. "Maybe both." They didn't rise immediately. There was no urgency in this morning, no alerts or scans or scouting ships. Just the weight of another day they'd both lived to see, and chosen to spend with each other. Eventually, Sci-Fi rolled onto her back, hair fanned over the pillow, eyes fixed on the wooden ceiling above them. "I used to think waking up meant remembering who you were," she said softly. "And now?" he asked. "Now it means deciding who I want to be." She turned her head, met his eyes. "And today, I want to be someone who kisses you every hour." "That could interrupt the harvest," Auden warned. "That's a risk I'm willing to take." She leaned in again, kissed the corner of his mouth this time, then the base of his throat, then the scar near his shoulder he never talked about, and she never asked about, but always kissed anyway. By the time they pulled on clothes, slowly, not entirely urgently, the sun had pierced through the clouds for the first time in weeks. Pale gold light spilled through the harvest window, casting their bodies in a warmth deeper than fire. In the field, the vines swayed toward them as they passed, tuning their chords to match the beat of their footsteps. Sirae picked a joy fruit and split it between them without a word. Auden kissed the juice from her lower lip. She let him. And when he pulled her close, she leaned in like she had belonged to that embrace since the moment her voice was silenced and finally found its way home. Their laughter carried into the valley. The crops responded in kind, not with sadness, not with fear, but with a new sound that neither had ever heard before. A harmony shaped by kisses stitched into breath, rooted in love, and this time it stayed forever.